You guys can be as religious as you want to be. Oh, there we go. As you want to be, but the reality is religion changes a lot of stuff. If you adhere to a select religion, no matter what it is, it doesn't really matter whether you're a Seventh-day Adventist or a Presbyterian or a Jehovah's Witness, it really doesn't matter what religion you adhere to. That religion claims that they know the way to get to heaven, and other religions are incorrect. How about that? Okay. So there's a vast difference between Protestantism and Catholicism, because remember, Catholicism told you that the only way that you could get to heaven was to listen to what the priests said. So the Pope was in charge, and he told the priests how to get people to go to heaven, and then the priest told you how to get to heaven. And part of the ceremony was in Latin. Well, all the ceremony was in Latin. That's the Catholics. And then the Protestants came along, and the Protestants decided, well, that's not right. And the reason the Protestants were called Protestants is protest. They were protesting the Catholic Church. I don't know if that thing's shooting in the right direction. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, that's good enough, I guess. Anyway, well, they listened to me do that. Anyway, okay, they were called Protestants, and remember, they tried to rebel against the church, and this started about 400 years before it actually took effect, took hold, because there were a lot of Protestants out there, and they mounted crusades against them because they were blasphemers. The Catholics knew that there was only one way to get to heaven, and that way was their way. So then the Protestants came in. The Protestants were able to establish themselves. And the reason they were able to establish themselves was because they were in Germany. And the Germany is far enough away from Rome, far enough away from the people with the armies, that they were actually able to maintain a religion. They weren't the first ones. The Lutherans were not the first Protestants. There was Zwingliism. There were other individuals that actually were able to take hold. And the reason they were able to take hold, Zwingli, for example, Zwingli was from Switzerland. And Switzerland is up in the Alps. And if you want to attack somebody in the Alps, you've got to climb up to get to them. And you've got to bring your army with you. And of course, they're up above. They're in a superior position. All they need to do is drop a rock on your head. And if they drop that rock on your head, well, you're not alive anymore. Anyway, so Zwingli was able to establish a Protestant religion. It wasn't very extensive. There weren't very many people that adhered to it. They were only able to maintain it up in the mountains, up in the Alps. But then Martin Luther, of course, who was a priest, decided that the Catholic Church was doing too many things that he didn't like. And so he came up with his 99 points. And that's what the next slide's about. That is actually a picture. No, it's not. We don't know what he looked like. Anyway, Martin Luther, he developed, he was the one that established Lutheranism. Martin Luther was the founder of expanded Protestantism. So the Lutheran Church started once the Lutheran Church was able to take hold and the Catholics weren't able to destroy them. Then other ideas came along. But Lutheranism was the first. Lutheranism was the first one that took hold. Let's say that. Zwingli, of course, was up in the Alps, and he was way too far away from anybody to really influence a lot of people. But Luther was. And Luther was down in Germany. He was down in the plains of Germany. He tacked his 99 points on the door of the cathedral in Worms, and Worms is in a valley in Germany. It's an area that's just above the Black Forest. So it's really kind of cool that he was able to do that. But of course the Catholic armies weren't able to get in there and eradicate them. And not only that, but there were a lot of Germans that agreed with him. Remember, the Catholic religion was being taught in Latin. So there weren't very many people that actually spoke Latin, not even the Italians spoke Latin. By that time, the language had evolved to Italian. So actually there were very few people that actually understood what they were saying when they were preaching to you or preaching at you. Luther, so we'll pretend he was the founder of Protestantism. He proposed that each individual had a calling, which is kind of an interesting idea. The Catholics told you to be good and then you get to go to heaven. But Luther said, no, we are all individuals and each individual has a calling. And you need to follow your calling in order to go to heaven. You need to do what you're supposed to do. The calling, the idea of the calling was a unique God-given purpose to fulfill during his or her mortal existence. And sometimes your calling might have been to produce children, to have as many children as you possibly could. That might be your calling. Your calling might have to do with being a preacher. Your calling might have to do with building a factory. That may be your calling. I like to pretend that my calling is that I teach. I pretend. I'm just pretending. I talk about games all the time and playing, because I'm playing right now. I'm having a good time. I'm just here for a good time. I keep telling you guys that. The idea was that we are all God's servants in the world and that we are each given a specific duty or a job to take care of while we tend the planet. That's our job. God gives each individual the unique skills and capabilities needed to fulfill their calling, and it is incumbent upon individuals to discover their calling. So you guys go out and prosper and go out and find your calling, whatever that may happen to be. How about that? When do you have to do this? You have to do it by the time you're 25 years old? No, you can come upon your calling at any point during your life, as long as you fulfill your destiny. And your destiny, of course, was predetermined. Remember, they believed in predestination. In other words, you're born with this need, with this thing that you're supposed to do.
I have a question.
Yes.
What if they never find it? Is that a bad thing? They don't find the calling?
You go to hell, of course. You
Oh.
slimy, demon-filled son of a bitch. I put that on tape. No, you're supposed to find your calling. If you don't find your calling, you're not going to go to heaven. Well, you don't go to heaven. So, okay. I'm not saying you go to hell. Well, I should have said you'd go to hell, but of course you just didn't get...
You might go somewhere not heaven.
You wouldn't go to heaven anyway. The Protestants don't really not have... You know, the Catholics have purgatory, which is in between heaven and hell. But Protestants don't have purgatory, so I'm not exactly... You got to go someplace. Maybe you would become a ghost and haunt New Orleans or something. I don't know. The highest moral duty that individuals were believed to have was to serve God well by working hard at their calling. So working hard is part of the Protestant ethic. Luther was able to imbue daily labor with a spiritual significance that had traditionally been reserved for religious activities such as prayer and ritual. So he put labor. So people worked as hard as they possibly could, because they wanted to go to heaven. So if you worked hard every day at whatever it is that you did, then you potentially would go to heaven. If you didn't work hard, guess where you got to go? Jeff. So whether you fulfilled your calling or not is not really important, as long as you worked hard. So you worked hard at anything that you did. So when you went out into the fields, you gave them a good day's labor. Now this is really kind of interesting, because I grew up around farmers, and these guys got up before the sun came up, and they milked the cows so that they could get out in the fields when the sun came up. So they would milk all their damn cows, and then at night they would have to milk their cows again. You have to milk cows twice a day. So they would milk their cows in the evening before they went in to eat supper. Now, normally what happened, they would go and milk their cows before it got light, Then they would go and eat a really big breakfast. They go out in the field and work their asses off all day. They would come in at lunch, or their wives would bring them a huge, huge, hearty lunch, lots of fat and lots of sugar, so that they could work really hard the rest of the day. They would work really, really hard in the fields, and when it starts to get dark, they would park their tractors, they would run into the barn, they would bring their cows in, they'd milk their cows, and then they would go and eat supper. That's the way it worked. So these guys were working their tails off all summer long, all through the summer. They worked themselves almost to death. I mean, they got up before the sun came up so they could milk their cows, and it was just a really, really hard work. But they were all Protestants. If they had been Catholic, I don't know if they would have done exactly the same thing, if they had worked exactly the same way. Because Catholics also have to put a lot of energy into prayer, and they have to go to church, Mass, at select times during the week. On Sunday, they have to go to Mass, and I think they're supposed to, well, it all depends. Some people go to Mass every day, every morning, if you're really good. I mean, you're supposed to do that. You don't have to do that when you're young, when you're working, but after you retire, you're supposed to go to Mass every day and pray every day. And of course, Protestants can pray while they're riding on their tractor. But of course, if you're Catholic, then the priest has to pray for you. So you have to go to church in order to pray. Because Protestants came to view work as a spiritual task, they wish to avoid debasing it by holding a casual or unprofessional attitude. And this is why they're such stick in the muds. They always work hard. And if they don't work hard, they feel like they've cheated God. Protestants felt that people should take their work very seriously, and of course they always do. And this is known as the Protestant work ethic. The fact that they bust their tails. Anything that they do, they bust their tails at. It was believed that God would not reward those who were doomed to burn in hell, so any sign of material success was perceived as evidence that one was one of the elite, of the elect being they were elected to go to heaven. Remember, all this is predestined. So if you're supposed to go to heaven, then you would go to heaven. But you had to work your butt off to go to heaven. You had to fulfill your destiny. And then you got to go to heaven. So God would reward you with money. So the more money you made, the more God was rewarding you. Which makes what? Donald Trump one of the most rewarded people in the United States because of his billions of dollars. Obviously, God has rewarded him. He's not rewarded me. I don't make millions of dollars.
I think the devil's rewarding you.
I'm not worried about that. Or Bill Gates. Bill Gates pisses me off, I swear. He comes up with a new Windows every other year, and by golly, he just screws everything up. And he makes, what, $250 off of each one? He's the richest man in the world. I think he is, if I'm not mistaken. So evidently, he's the best. He's going to get to go to heaven. So the more money you have, the more money you can accumulate. That means God is rewarding you. It's kind of exciting. However, you're supposed to take your money and reinvest it. You don't just accumulate wealth. That's not what the job is. And not only that, but you have to work hard every day. So going off to Bermuda and partying for 3 months, you're going to go to hell. You got to be careful. You need to work every day. So if you accumulate wealth, you have to reinvest it. And this is what has happened in Protestant countries. In Protestant countries, you not only build a factory, but you work hard every day, and all the money that comes into you, all the profits that come into you, you reinvest in either that company or another company. And that's why you've got all of these wealthy people that are so diversified, because all the money that comes in, they don't really have any any wealth that they could spend because they are reinvesting in another company. And these are all Protestants. This is all the Protestant ethic. This is the way it works. So they have to reinvest it. They have to work hard every day. They can't sit on their money. They have to spend it. And they have to spend it on important things, not yachts, okay? Modern capitalism, as Weber viewed it, was thus concerned with the accumulation of wealth for its own sake and not for the sake of material pleasures that it brought. These individuals would live in mansions. They would live in really big houses. They would accumulate things. But of course, if they bought this yacht, that meant that somebody had to build this yacht. So they are, in essence, they are reinvesting their money. Okay, so they're okay. Right. A recent analysis found that Protestants and people living in Protestant societies were generally considered the prospect of being unemployed as more of a blow to their well-being than non-Protestants living in non-Protestant societies do. If you're not doing anything, if you're not working, you're not going to school, then Protestants it really bugs them. And they feel like they're not doing something that they should do. If they're unemployed, so they put a sack over their head, try to hide. They don't want anybody to know who they are. That's the idea of the sack. Okay. But it's a more serious thing in a Protestant society. You okay?
Yeah.
In the early 21st century, a study revealed that Protestant nations were far more industrialized than their Catholic counterparts. Are you all right?
Fine.
He's grimacing in pain and telling me that he's okay. Okay. Then Catholic counterparts and religious differences accounted for much of the fact that Protestant countries have a lot more money. There's a lot more industrialization. And of course, that's one of the things that the campaign was run on last time. The Trump campaign was that we need to reindustrialize. We need to bring those manufacturing jobs back to the United States. And of course, that hit home with all of these individuals that didn't have a job, or they are retired and they used to work, but those factories are closed. So these individuals thought that he would actually bring industry back to the United States. And that's the way they voted. And it was for this very reason. A lot of them are Protestants. A lot of good Baptists voted for Donald Trump. I hate to pick on Donald. I don't know how much trouble he's in right now. A degree of individualism exists in the Protestant countries compared to that to other countries. The 6 most individualistic countries in the world are largely Protestant, whereas the least individualistic Western societies are largely Catholic. So what would be a country in the Western society that's Catholic?
The Western society. Is that the United States?
That's the United States, Europe, Australia.
I would say like the Northern Plain Indians would be considered Catholic.
They are Catholic, extremely Catholic. And you
Yeah.
guys are Catholic, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay. The Grove on Catholics own Fort Belknap. My God. We couldn't expand the college because the church owned all the land around the church. So we were kind of stuck.
Well, like it's really interesting how the Catholic culture has kind of intertwined it with the Native American culture, like with our culture.
Right.
And then you go to Catholic here, or the church here, they're Roman Catholic, and they're really, really Catholic. But they use the Native American church too.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. It's really fascinating, I guess. Anyway, yeah. And people will die and give all their stuff to the church. I know. Up on Fort Belknap, they give their stuff to the church. If they've got any horses or land, they give it to the church. not, church is too rich, it's got too much stuff. Damn it, we couldn't expand the college because they owned all the land around it, around the college. So we were surrounded by the church. By the Catholic Church on one side, and then there was a evangelical church on the other side. So we had to, build around them. It was really interesting. Right behind the college is a church, right? Have you ever been to that church?
The blue one?
The Catholic church?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it just looks like let's say what it looks like. Anyway, there's a bell outside. It doesn't look like a church. Just looks like a building. Anyway, that's one of the reasons why the college can't expand. Because right behind the college is the Catholic Church. And they own the parking lot, which seems kind of strange to me. Anyway, I'm not a very good religious person, so obviously I'm not a very good religious person, so I want all this stuff taken away from me. Why is that?
So what is your family? I
What?
know you're kind of atheist, but.
Oh, my
what is your
family's
family?
atheist.
Huh?
My family's atheist.
Atheist? What was your ancestors?
Quakers and Baptists and Methodists. Why is this not working? Oh, God must be punishing me. Oh, it's sad to be punished by God. Countries dominated by various Asian religions also tend to score low in individualism. And I know, and it was tough being atheist in the 50s because, well, there was a movement that everybody had to go to church, and the First Amendment says that freedom is freedom of religion, but not freedom from religion. It says freedom of religion. So some people interpret that as you have to have a religion. I know, that was tough in the 1950s. Countries dominated by various Asian religions also tend to score low in individualism, and of course, the Japanese, the Koreans, the Chinese, the Malaysians, the Indians, not a whole lot of individualism that we're dealing with. Pronounce differences in embracing. This is in your textbook. If I wrote this textbook, I could write some fairly negative things about religions, and I try to control myself. But this is all in your textbook. So this is reality. It's not just me ranting and raving about how bad religion is. This is all in your textbook. I don't know what religion he is. It's hard to tell, but I'm guessing he's a Lutheran. From the way all the positive things he said about Martin Luther, I'm guessing he's a Lutheran. I had a colleague. I'm going to move this thing over a little bit. I had a colleague when I was at Ashford who was a Lutheran minister. He was an interesting fellow. Lutheran minister. He's a preacher man. No. We got along okay. He thought I was funny, since I was going to hell. Pronounced differences in embracing an intrinsic work ethic were observed between Western European Catholics and mainstream Protestants as evident in a measure of work values, and of course that's research done by Georgi and Marsh. So Protestants have this work ethic, and we can tell the difference between a worker who is Catholic and a worker who is a Protestant by the way they approach their labor, as confusing as that is. Okay, we're going to get into one more thing. Well, there's a lot of different interesting things. The Protestant ethic also has been associated with negative attitudes toward laziness and being overweight. And of course, people talk about the people in the United States being negative about people that are overweight. The main reason is because the majority of the people in the United States are Protestant. Right? Does everybody recognize that? Up at Fort Belknap, I had to convince them that the majority of the people were Protestant. They thought everybody was Catholic. Because everybody on that reservation, almost everybody on that reservation is Catholic. Because the church is really powerful in that area. Not only that, but they own huge chunks of the reservation. Anyway, it was really very difficult to convince them. But you guys understand that the majority of the people in the United States are Protestant, right?
I never even heard of Protestant.
You've never heard of them.
I thought Protestant was like crackers or something.
You thought it was what?
Crackers.
Crackers.
People from Georgia and Alabama. Okay.
I mean, like, I've heard of Baptist, Christian, Catholic, Indian. That's about it.
Southern Baptist,
See, most of those are Protestant religions.
Methodist.
Methodists are Protestants. You know, anything that's not Catholic is Protestant. The Mormon churches, Church of Latter-day Saints is Protestant. Okay, and there's a reason why we say this. Initially, there was one church, right? Jesus died, and then they created the church, the Jesus' church, and they became the Catholic Church. So there's only one church. So it was this way for an extended length of time. Are you still in pain?
That's okay.
Are you dying?
No.
It's the religion.
I'll leave you alone. Okay, so there was one church, and it was this way for about 1,000 years. And then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, and of course there was a lot of arguing going back and forth, and they couldn't decide this, and they couldn't decide that. So about 1000 AD, 1,000 years after the church was developed, the Orthodox Church split away from the Catholic portion of the church. And before that, it was just the church. Now all of a sudden, it's the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church. And the Orthodox Church includes the Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Serbian Orthodox. Anybody east of Europe is Orthodox. So Russia was Orthodox, the Serbs and the Greeks, and all those people. And that's all east of Europe, of Western Europe anyway. So we've got the Catholics, and now we've got the Orthodox. And so for the next 500 years, the Catholic Church is the only church in any Europe. And then Martin Luther, of course, there were Protestant movements in Europe. And why in the world would you name a religious group the Protestants, the Protestants? Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you call them, the sons of God or something? Why would you call them something negative like Protestants? And the answer is because it was the Catholics that named them the Protestants. It's kind of like the Navajo and Dene. You guys call yourselves the Dene, the children of the holy people, right? But everybody else calls you the Navajo. Same way with the Comanche. They're the Numina. They are the people. But everybody else calls them the Comanche. Why? Well, that's the name that everybody else gave them. So the Catholics gave the Protestants the name Protestants, Protestants. And it's a negative name, just like Navajo's a negative name compared to Dene. Okay, so that happened about 1500 AD. And so all of these Protestants couldn't agree on anything, so we developed all these different religions. So the Lutheran Church, we developed the Methodist Church, the Baptist Church. These are all different ideas. The Presbyterians, the Episcopalians, all of these, the Church of the Nazarene, the Church of Christ, Church of God, all of these Pentecostal groups, they all have different ideas as to how to get to heaven. The Catholics only have one idea of how to get to heaven, but all the Protestant religions, what have I done? I've lost over half my class. So the Protestant religions all have different ideas, right? So the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Jehovah's Witnesses have only been around since about the turn of the 20th century. They've only been around for about 115 years. As interesting as that is, I guess it's not that interesting. Anyway, we keep coming up with these new Protestant religions. So anybody that's not Catholic and they consider themselves Christian are Protestant. And that includes the Church of Latter-day Saints. which was developed by Joseph Smith in Elmira, New York. He wrote the Book of Mormon in Elmira. I don't know if I should go ahead or not. That's everybody. My God, what did I do? So the Protestants have this different idea. I mean, and that's what we're really talking about. We're talking about this different idea that they have. McClellan in 1961 found that Protestant parents expected their children to become self-reliant at an earlier age compared with Catholic parents. And of course, this is something that I talked about. Actually, I don't know if I asked you guys the question. I think I did. I said up on Fort Belknap, the mothers don't want their children to leave the reservation. And if they go out to the university to get better education, the mothers are always crying for them to come home, trying to get them to come home. But as Andrea told you, the people on Fort Belknap are all Catholic. So they have this different idea. Protestants, I'm from Indiana. Indiana is primarily Protestant. In Indiana, of course, we're trying to get rid of our kids. We're trying to raise them to get them out of the damn house. We're trying to make them self-reliant. I brag about my children. I had a daughter in Florida and I had a son in California. And here I am someplace in between. And they can take care of themselves. And I was really proud of that. But that's a Protestant ethic. Catholic parents want their kids to stay close to home. But Protestants want to get rid of your kids. Not to ship them out as far as you can possibly ship them, but trying to get them to be able to do their own thing, to be able to take care of themselves. So I didn't raise my kids to live with me. I raised my kids to take care of themselves, and they have. They're both in their 40s, and they're doing pretty good. McClellan in 1961 investigated the stories written by young boys and found that those written by German Protestants had more evidence of strong achievement motivations than those that were written by German Catholics. And there's a reason why I have this picture of this village in Germany. This is a Lutheran church, and there's the Catholic church. Remember, I told you the German government maintains the churches in Germany, and they have a Protestant church. So they build a Protestant church in every village and a Catholic church, not in the really tiny ones, but in the villages with a select number of children. Now the interesting thing, and this is what they say about the Lutherans build tall spires, as tall as they can possibly build them. And the reason they do that is so that they'll be closer to heaven. As you can see, this is so we know which one is a Lutheran church, and we know which one is the Catholic cathedral, because the Catholic cathedral isn't nearly as tall as the Lutheran church. Now the interesting thing was, I used to live in Nebraska, and there's a lot of Lutherans in Nebraska, a lot of Northern Germans and Swedes and Norwegians and whatnot. So there's a lot of Lutherans in Nebraska. So as you're driving along the road, and you come across a church, of course, you can tell if it's a Lutheran church or whether it's a Methodist church or whether it's a Baptist church, because a Lutheran church has a really tall spire, just like that. It's really kind of interesting. And the Catholic churches, of course, they do have spires, but they're not nearly as tall. I mean, there's really no reason to build a spire like that, right? Who would do that? Well, the Lutherans do, of course. Ullman, Tannenbaum, and Barg in 2011 primed a group of Americans and a group of Canadians with salvation words or neutral words, and then gave them a task to do. So he's giving them these words. Some of them are words of salvation, and some of them are not. They're just neutral words. There are a group of Americans and a group of Canadians. This is really kind of fascinating. The Americans who were primed with salvation words worked harder on their task than those who were primed with neutral words. So the Americans actually worked harder. So what happened with the Canadians? Well, we're not going to tell you quite yet. The Americans' results indicate that notions of hard work and salvation are implicitly linked with them for Americans. So these words, these salvation words make you work harder. This pattern occurred regardless of whether or not the American participants were religious, providing some evidence for Weber's claim that ideas about predestination become secularized and thus part of the American cultural fabric. And this is what we talk about. This is what presidents talk about the American work ethic. We have a strong work ethic. We have the Protestant work ethic. And it's not a religious thing, it's secularized. So everybody works hard. It is part of our fabric, part of our national fabric, and that is in the United States. The Canadians, on the other hand, now you'd think, come on, the Canadians are just north of us. Aren't they the same as we are? It's a primarily Protestant nation. No, the Canadian participants did not work any harder when primed with ideas about salvation, suggesting that an implicit link between salvation and working was not evident. Now, why in the world would they be different from the Americans? Didn't they evolve the same as the United States did?
They have the crown.
They do, exactly. That is the right answer to that question. They have a caste system. In the United States, if you want to succeed, you can succeed. You can be the biggest dumb shit in the world, and as long as you make money, you can be a very famous and popular person. In the United States, that's possible. You can start with nothing and become Bill Gates, which is actually, well, his family wasn't too that bad off. I mean, they were in pretty good shape. But in Canada, you can't, because they have a class system. It's the same way in England. Remember, the Canadians want to be English. So that is part of their culture, is this desire to be just like England. And of course, England is based on class. So they have the royal family, they have all of these different classes. We have classes in the United States too, but how do you get into a class? Well, first of all, you're born into a select class, but you can skip classes if you want. I mean, as long as you're successful, you can do anything that you want. Or you can crack yourself down to being homeless and nobody likes you. No offense. Somebody's got to. He sits in class and nobody even talks to him. I think it's so sad. So the Canadians are different. They really are. And this, of course, is one of the ways that they are different. So you're right. They do have the royal family. They have a class system. And it's striated that way. I mean, they give people, they call them lords and ladies and whatnot. We don't call anybody anything in the United States. We don't have, Lord Trump and Lady Melania. We don't do that in the United States. But they do in Canada. They have that whole royal structure, that whole hierarchy that takes place, as stupid as that is. Okay, so the Canadians are different. They have a different personality than we do. Cohen, Kim, and Hudson induced, this is a weird experiment. They took a group of American Protestants, Jews, and Catholics, and they told them to imagine that they were having sex with their sister. Isn't that horrible? Imagine you're having sex with your sister. That's what they told them. I know this sounds really bizarre. And then they had them make sculptures. Are you ready for this? This stretches things out just a little bit. The Protestants were judged as working harder on their sculptures than the Jews and the Catholics, or the Protestants not primed for depravity about their sisters. Okay. So, now why in the world would they do that? Why would they work harder on their sculptures if they were thinking about having sex with their sisters? As horrible as that is, why would they work harder? Why? The Catholics didn't, the Jews didn't, and the Protestants that weren't primed with these horrible thoughts about their sisters didn't try harder. But the Protestants that were primed to have sex with their sisters, this disgusting idea, this depravity, having sex, which is incest, of course. So why in the world would they work harder? Why would that group work harder? Why wouldn't the Jews work harder? Why wouldn't, I mean, they were thinking about having sex with their sisters, so why wouldn't they work harder?
Work ethic? I don't know.
I'm sorry?
Work ethic? I don't know. Like,
So why would working harder make you feel better about having sex with your sister?
I was saying like, just to be better than everyone. You know, like just to do the sculpture better than everyone else, I guess. That's,
You don't have a sister, so we can't do this with you, okay? What a horrible thought. My God. So what's going on here? Why would they work harder? The Protestants who thought about having sex with their sisters, which is a god-awful thought.
So everything they do, they work harder.
Right. Everything they do, they work harder, sure, of course. But the other Protestants that weren't primed to think about having sex with their sister, they didn't work any harder. So what is it that made these guys work so hard? If you're a Protestant and you sin, how in the world can you make up for that? By working hard. If you're a Catholic and you sin, how can you make up for that?
Mary's.
Repent.
Okay.
How-
Repent.
Repent. Well, how do you repent?
You say Hail Marys.
Well, who tells you to say it?
Oh,
The
the
priest.
priest.
Yeah, so you have to go to confession. So these guys, I'm thinking these depraved thoughts, and of course I've seen this on television, I've never been to confession, but thinking these depraved thoughts, the priest will say, well, say 5 Hail Marys and 3 Our Fathers, and you're good to go. You're taken care of. So the Catholics, they have an out. How about the Jews? Why wouldn't they work hard? How do they atone for their sins? How do Jews atone for their sins?
Talk to a rabbi, I'm just guessing.
Actually, they don't. They just pray.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So they got it taken care of. But Protestants, how do they take care of their sins?
They confess their sins.
They can't confess. They don't have anybody to confess to. Prayer doesn't work. Or I guess it does work, but they work
Well,
hard.
If Protestants are a Baptist in the Christian culture, they confess their sins and they get saved, you know, and
Yeah, okay. But they can take care of all that just by working real hard. Remember, work is a religious act as far as they're concerned. So the harder they work, the less likely that their sin will repeat on them. It will drive them to hell. I'm sorry. Anyway, as bizarre as that sounds, isn't this the strangest piece of research you've ever heard of? Okay, we want you to think about having sex with your sister. Now we're going to build a sculpture and see how well you do, as bizarre as that is. The researchers concluded that it was the depraved thoughts that induced the Protestants to work harder, of course, and that's how they atone for their sins, is by working hard. We can see the world as fixed and beyond our control to change. This is known as the entity theory of the world. Or we can think of the world as flexible and responsive to our efforts to change it, an incremental theory of the world. And this has to do with reading the news every day. If you think that you can't, there's no possibility you can ever change anything, then what are you going to do about all the horrors that take place? Are you ever going to send money to the people in Puerto Rico? They only have 19% of the island has electricity. They're having problems with water. Don't you feel bad, Joe? Send them your Coke.
Okay.
Okay.
It's almost done.
They need bottled water. They can't manufacture their own water. So they don't have any clean water to drink. They're drinking contaminated water. This is really kind of scary, if you think about it. So if you think that you can fix the world, this is known as the incremental theory of the world. And if you don't think that you have any possibility, if you see it as beyond your control, it's known as the entity theory of the world. Rothbaum, Weiss, and Snyder in 1982 proposed that there are two ways to gain control of your life. People achieve a sense of primary control by striving to shape existing realities to fit their perceptions, goals, or wishes. Primary control also goes under the related name of internal locus of control, influence, and agency. All of you have internal locus of control. All of you have primary control. How do I know that? Because you're going to school, trying to improve yourselves. If you thought that the world were fixed, then you wouldn't come to going to college wouldn't make any sense. You wouldn't need it because the world is already fixed. You're already stuck where you're going to be, and you can't improve yourself.
So with President Trump, do we think we can, what do you call it, where we can't fix it? Like, because I was watching news this morning, it said that if it came down to where he gave an executive order, is there people there that can talk him out of it or stop him, you know? I mean, they were basically kind of saying no. So are we kind of in the entity theory of the world right now?
No. Actually, the people that voted for Trump, they thought that the United States needed to be fixed. It was broken. And Obama's the one that broke it. So people that voted for Donald Trump wanted to fix things. And they thought that he could do it because he said he could. And of course, he's a billionaire. You believe everything a billionaire tells you. I mean, if Bill Gates wanted to run for office, we'd elect him in a nanosecond. No, it's actually the opposite. They think that it's broken and it needs to be fixed. They want Washington fixed. They think Washington is broken. So they want Donald Trump to fix everything. They want to give him exceptional powers, almost tyrannical powers. A lot of people do. They want him to take charge and become a dictator because he says that he can fix everything, and they believe it, and that's why they voted for him. So it's actually the very opposite. They think the world is fixable, and that he's the one that can do it. The problem is, of course, he has no control over it. Well, he doesn't have control over a lot of things. I mean, the president actually only has control over select things. Congress has control over some things. The Supreme Court has control over some things. So he writes executive orders, and what happens, the Supreme Court's, a court decides that what he has said is unconstitutional. Then he gets pissed off and says, well, we need to change all this. Same thing happened in Congress. He was trying to do away with Obamacare, with the Affordable Care Act. It wasn't voted in. And so he says, well, you need to change Congress. You need to fix this. He wanted to change the way Congress did things so that he would get all of the stuff that he wanted. That's kind of dictatorial if you think about it. We've had other presidents that said exactly the same thing. Roosevelt, for example. The Depression was going on. Roosevelt had a plan to fix it. Some of the things he wanted to do were unconstitutional. These plans he had, some of them were, and of course he tried to pass them, and the Supreme Court said he couldn't. So what he tried to do, he tried to change the number of justices in the Supreme Court, which you can't do. There's 9. Anyway, he wanted to expand it to 13, so he could put all these liberal judges in there, and of course it didn't happen. Okay, so people think that the United States is broken, needs to be fixed, and that's why they voted for him. So yeah, it's actually the very opposite. But of course, he only has control over select things, right? Which is probably a good thing because, well, otherwise we've got a dictator, right? And they were afraid that's what Obama was going to do, of course. They were screaming that he was the next Hitler, that he was actually a Muslim, you know, it was all these different negative things that they felt he was. People achieve a sense of secondary control when they attempt to align themselves with existing realities, leaving the realities unchanged but exerting control, over the psychological impact of these realities. Secondary control, also known as adjustment, is related to the construct of external locus of control. Your designs and goals adjust themselves to what your environment is most likely to provide. So that's more an external locus of control. I complain about this all the time. I talk about the administration and how they're potentially not doing what they should do. That's my external locus of control. I can control what happens in my classroom as long as they leave me alone, but sometimes they don't leave you alone, of course. And you don't have control. I try not to live in that world at all, where they're allowed to control me, but I have to come to work tomorrow. It's your fault, Jeff, damn it. Thanks a lot, yeah, exactly. Wise and Rothbaum and Blackburn in 1984 see many socializing experiences in Japan that lead the Japanese to be more comfortable with engaging in secondary control strategies. Remember, this is a collectivist country, so they can't control their own environment. It's too damn crowded. So they use secondary control strategies. Remember, the only control they have is right here. That's why they do a lot of cosplay. That's why they dress in an interesting manner. They don't go to work like that. They dress the way they're supposed to dress to go to work. But then afterwards, they go and they play and they put pink wigs on and they dress like Sailor Moon. I think that's her name. Anyway, really weird stuff. The Japanese infants spend much more time in contact with their mothers, and thus they learn to adjust themselves to what their mothers are doing. And of course, because of this, they learn who's in control, and they do secondary things. So they adjust themselves to do what their mothers are doing. And this is the way they live their lives, by adjusting themselves to whatever's happening in the environment, so that they can get along. Japanese workers change jobs far less frequently than their Western counterparts, and it is not uncommon for workers to be promised lifetime employment. Lifetime employment. A system ensuring that the employees learn to adjust themselves to whatever demands the company places on them. I will take care of you the rest of your life, and I will give you $1,000 a month. All you have to do is do what I tell you to do. Would you take it? I'll give you a job that pays you $1,000 a month for the rest of your life. And all you have to do is what I tell you to do. All you have to do is what you need to do in order for the company to be successful. How about that? No? You don't want to do it? There are college professors that have been here for 30 years. They've been at Dene College for 30 years. Well, it wasn't Dene College 30 years ago. It was Navajo Community College. But they've been here for 30 years. They homestead. They've been here for 30 years. Would you do it? If I told you you could have a job for 30 years, would you do it? They're retiring next year, so it's not important. You can have their job, and you can do it for 30 years. Would you do it?
Yeah.
I'm guaranteeing you this amount of money every year. I'm going to give you a place to live. Would you do it?
But you still have to pay rent and your utilities.
Yeah.
Even if you're
I pay
faculty.
$200.
Well, still, I mean, another 800, I mean, 1,000, you know? And then you got propane.
That's only 800. I know.
Then you got propane. Have you paid propane?
Yeah, and I just bought 6 loads of wood for $600. I think that's how much. I have 6 loads of wood. That's $600. I'm broke. Right now, all I've got are nickels and dimes and quarters. That's all I've got. That's all the money I've got. I spent all my money yesterday on wood. I had $300, and I spent $300 on wood. You know? Yes, I actually haven't turned my furnace on. I'm stupid, I guess. In a Japanese and American study where workers were asked to recount when they had been helped and when they had helped others, the Americans were better able to recall when they had influenced others. The Japanese recalled far more times when they were assisted than when they helped someone else. So Americans remember when they did something good, and the Japanese remember when somebody else did something good for them. Isn't that interesting? Or do you find that interesting? Okay. So if you ever do them a favor, they will remember it for the rest of their lives. If I do you a favor, you're not going to remember past tomorrow afternoon. Because you're an American. You remember when you help people, not when other people help you. There is little emphasis on making choices in life to people from India. Making choices seems to be more difficult for Indians than for Americans. Indians take significantly more time to make choices than do Americans. We make choices all the time. Which restaurant are you going to go to? In Chinle. Wait a minute. How many restaurants are there? There's the Chinese restaurant. There's a pizza place, isn't there? Yeah, okay. There's Burger King. You can go to the Junction, which is at the motel, or you can go to the other motel. They have a restaurant too, so there's 6. How did I do? Oh, Denny's. I forgot Denny's. Is there another one?
There's a chicken restaurant.
Thunderbird. It's just a cafeteria, isn't it?
It's a restaurant.
Okay, that's 8. How am I doing? So you got a choice to make. If you were from India, it'd take you forever to figure out where you wanted to go. But Americans, we make choices all the time. We're used to doing that. And we have more choice. So when you go to the store,
Oh, Subway.
is there a Subway?
Yeah, there's one.
8, that's 9.
Yeah,
That's
sorry.
9.
I haven't seen it.
Thank you, Subway. Haven't been to a Subway in years.
You got the churches as well.
Oh, Church's Chicken. Oh. I forget about it because the last time my wife went there, she got sick. Food poisoning. Okay. So we don't go. That's 10. Okay, we're doing pretty good.
And you got like food stands scattered.
Throughout. Okay, so we got more. We got so many choices. If we were from India, it'd take us forever to figure out where we wanted to go eat. But as Americans, of course, we make these choices all the time. If we go into the supermarket, even if you go to Bosch's, how many different kinds of soap are there?
3.
Detergent, yeah, I know. Shampoo, oh my God, how do you ever make a decision? Dog food, oh my goodness gracious, there's 5 different types of dog food. Which one am I going to get for my dog? If I were from India, I'd spend all day in there trying to figure out what kind of beans I was going to get. As sad as that is. But we're Americans, so if you go to a store in India, they've got like 2 different kinds of detergent. They've got 2 different kinds of canned stewed tomatoes. But in the United States, of course, we have all kinds of choices to make, and we make choices all the time because we're Americans. Indians don't respond as negatively when they are deprived of the opportunity to choose as compared to Americans. So when they go into a grocery store and there's only one kind of soap, it doesn't bother them at all. It's like going to the gas station up here. You don't get to decide what kind of detergent you want. You get whatever's on the shelf because they've only got one kind. But in India, that's the way all their stores are. They only have one kind. You only have one choice. And it doesn't bother them a bit. Indians and people from numerous other non-Western cultures also indicate that they have less free choice in their lives compared with North Americans. And of course, we have tons of different choices. I'll tell you what, I've been to Canada, and I've gone into their stores, and they are very similar. They're not the same as we are. I know, they've got horns. No, they don't have courts. I'm just kidding. They don't have as many choices as we do in the United States. So they are more similar. I mean, it's not like they only have 2 choices, but we have like 15 different types of shampoo, and they'll have, 10.
Well, wouldn't it be also due to economic reasons?
Oh, sure, of course.
Like they're only able to like
Stock,
supply, pay
select
for,
different kinds.
have room, space.
I disagree.
You think there's more choices?
Disagree. Yeah, there's more choices in,
In Canada?
Yes, there is.
Oh my
Like,
God.
you have ketchup potato chips in Canada. You have pink elephant popcorn in Canada. You have Tim Hortons in Canada, Plus you have Starbucks and all the other stuff. The only thing Canada doesn't have is menthol cigarettes and Copenhagen or Chew. That's the only thing.
But we're talking about specific things.
And everybody in Canada gets a family allowance. They get a family allowance. They're working, plus they get a family allowance from the government.
So like some sort of assistance.
It's not assistance, it's just a family allowance for being
It's-
Canadian.
It comes out of their taxes. They pay higher taxes than we do. And then
Oh, they got
they-
4 taxes. They got the GST tax, they got the travel. They got so many taxes, it's crazy.
Yeah. So they get a paycheck, and half of their paycheck is gone, or literally half their paycheck is gone. They have, what am I thinking of? Their health care is universal. They have universal health care.
Yeah, they don't pay for their health.
They
Healthcare.
actually do. It comes out of their paycheck. So,
Oh, is it?
oh yeah, well, it's taxed.
You gotta pay for it away somehow.
Yeah. So, yeah, they just pay for it in a different place than we do. We pay for it at the end, and they
So
pay.
well, the tax is already included in the price, right? The price point. That's why things are like a little bit more expensive.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. Don't move to Canada. You're not going to like it. You got more choice in the United States. You're talking about Tim Hortons. You're talking about one restaurant. But if you go to the grocery store, they don't have. We have a whole wall full of pop, and you can have any kind you want. And they'll have just a small section for pop. And you can either get Sprite, but you can't get 7-Up because they only have one.
Ginger ale.
You can get ginger ale. Of course you can get ginger ale.
I went to the.
But they only have one kind of ginger ale. They don't have Canada Dry ginger ale.
It's Canadian dry ginger ale.
Canada Dry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went to the ice cream aisle in Safeway in Farmington. It was basically like a whole aisle full of like
Exactly.
various different ice cream.
Exactly. But they only have one kind of vanilla, one kind of chocolate, one kind of.
Different brands. So.
Which one? The new one?
The one by Best Buy.
Oh, okay.
It's like so much ice cream.
Don't move to Canada. You get your paycheck and you got no money. And that's another reason why they only have so few choices, because they can't buy high-end stuff because they don't have that much money. They don't get paid that way. It's strange, and their dollar's not worth as much as ours.
No, their dollar, sometimes during the year, their dollar fluctuates more than ours. For reals.
That may be true, but it's still 70 cents on the dollar.
I don't know. My stepmom, she won 27,000 from bingo. And she took it over here, and with the GST tax, tax exchange and everything, she got like 24.
Sure.
24, but nowadays she probably would have got about 26.
But
the point is that it still went down though, right?
their money's only worth like 70 cents on the dollar, and it's been that way for like a really long time, 15 years.
When President Trump got elected, the currency of the United States went down.
Yeah. But doesn't have anything to do with him.
Okay.
He doesn't control money. Choices do not appear to play as large a part in the lives of Indians as North Americans. We just talked about that. So what's going on next? The more important the action, the more likely Americans were to identify it as a personal choice, whereas for Indians, the more important the action, the less likely they were to view it as a personal choice. When Americans were given an opportunity to choose something that they almost always select the option that they prefer. The link between preferences and choices isn't as tight among Indians. They are less likely to choose their favorite option. But whereas we are, as Americans, I'm always going to take a Code Red Mountain Dew because that's my favorite. I like Code Red.
Unless they discontinue it.
I'm sorry?
Unless they discontinue it and make something else.
So let's go to West Germany. Let's go to East Germany. When I was stationed in Germany, this is in 79 through 82. So East and West Germany were intact at that point. There was an East Germany, there was a West Germany. And the reason that we were there was just in case the Russians invaded. This is during 1980 when we had that big dust-up with the Russians. So it was very possible, not probable, of course, it was very possible that we would go to war with the Russians. The Russians were fighting in Afghanistan at the time. The Iranians had just kicked us out of Iran, and we thought that the Russians were going to move into Iran. They didn't, but it was always a possibility. So there was a lot of tension going on. So I visited East Berlin. It's the only place you can go to. If you're an American soldier, you can't just cross the border and go touristy around East Germany. They wouldn't let you do that. The only place we could cross the border was in East Berlin. And we had to stay in East Berlin. We couldn't go anyplace else. In learned helplessness, an individual feels that he or she is unable to control or to avoid unpleasant events, and the person will suffer from stress and potentially depression because of learned helplessness. A study by Ottingen and Seligman in 1990 found that East Berliners showed more signs of learned helplessness than the people on the other side of the wall in West Berlin. The wall came down in 1989, so this is really kind of interesting that they did a study in Germany in 1990, since the wall had come down the year before. But they could still, there were still people living in East Berlin who were East Germans, of course. They weren't East Germans anymore, but they were, actually Germany didn't consolidate the two Germanys until 1982, so that's what happened. Anyway, Snibe and Marcus in 2005 argued that upper middle class Americans are raised to favor choices and to express themselves through their choices. So when you look at somebody's ride, what kind of car do you drive? And I asked everybody about their cars last time. But we can talk about makes of cars. Both of my cars are Mazdas, which are, I like Mazdas. Nice solid cars. Why are Mazdas so solid? Single body construction.
Are they foreign?
Mazda? That's made in Japan. Actually, it's made, both my cars were made in the United States. They were made by a Japanese company. It's owned 52% of it's owned by the Japanese.
Oh, I know. Mazdas, they focus on the detail of the vehicle.
Yes, you're right. They do.
I seen that commercial a couple days ago.
Okay. Right. The guy's got that clay and he's carving it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's my
and
favorite
he's
commercial.
sewing the steering wheel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my steering wheel's sewn.
Is it?
So what kind of a car do you have?
I have a F-150,
Ford.
Platinum Ford.
Ford. Jeff? What kind of car do you have?
Big guy.
Toyota.
Toyota.
Usually-
Ford.
Yeah, usually it's, Toyota right there. Look. And Nissan too.
You have two cars.
Yeah, but I'm driving a Chevy Tahoe,
Okay. So what's the other car?
Dodge Charger.
Dodge. Okay. Right? Dodge. Okay.
Volkswagen.
Volkswagen. Dodge. Dodge. Volkswagen.
Dodges rule, yeah.
Dodge rule.
Mhm.
Like the transmissions. As if we were all wealthy, we could pick any car that we wanted. What if you could have any car in the world? Would it be the Ford F-150?
Chevy
A
Camaro.
Camaro? Okay.
I know it's a weird one, but a Firebird I've always wanted one.
You have always wanted a Firebird? They don't make Pontiacs.
I know.
Okay.
I know.
I'm just trying to help, okay.
I know.
Any car in the world? Stick with the ones you've got? Or you want
Like any car?
any car you want?
Like a Lamborghini or something.
Lamborghini, sure. Can you get all the people that you need in a Lamborghini?
Oh, just me and my son.
There you go, that's enough. That's 2 seats, all you need.
Audi,
Audi? I used to have an Audi in Germany, it's really kind of interesting.
Ford Raptor.
You want a Ford? Okay, a Raptor, okay.
Oh, Ford Raptors.
So you want one too? Now you want a Ford Raptor too, okay. If we were rich, we could pick any car that we wanted. We'd have all this income that we could spend all of our money on, and we would be able to make our choices. But of course, your choices have to do with your circumstance, right? So when you decided to buy your Toyota, you went to the car dealer, and that was the one you could afford. Right. Okay. But if we were upper middle class Americans, potentially we would have all this disposable income. So upper middle class Americans learn to respond quite negatively when they believe that they do not have any choice in a situation. So if we were upper middle class and we were applying to colleges, we'd apply to a number of colleges, and they would all be fairly prestigious. We would, and we would hope that we would be accepted by at least 2 or 3 of them, so that we would have a choice as to where we went to college. If we were upper middle class Americans. Working class Americans, on the other hand, they grew up learning that much of what people encounter in life is beyond their control. They're workers. They've got to work wherever they work. They've got a job. They can't go and get another job anyplace else. So they learn that most of the control in their life is well beyond their control. And a good way to maintain one's independence is to emphasize one's integrity and resilience during tough times. So you have to be as tough as you possibly can. And this is one of the reasons why when things close, when a factory closes or it reduces its labor force, this is one of the reasons why people are willing to take a cut in pay. They're working class. They would rather have a job for less pay than no job at all. So rather than complain about it, they accept their lot in life. And that is the last thing I could talk about today, because it's time to go. So I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for being such a responsive group of individuals.